This is Gary Berman, host of the Cyberhero Adventure Show. Today's guest is David Shedd, one of the most experienced intelligence leaders to ever serve the United States. David spent more than 3 decades in the U.S. intelligence community, including senior leadership roles at the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, where he served as Principal Deputy DNI and later as Acting Director of National Intelligence. He's known as a quiet professional, someone who understands how intelligence actually works behind the scenes, how nations steal secrets, how institutions fail to protect them, and what happens when economic and technological power quietly shifts hands. David is also the co-author of The Great Heist, a deeply researched account of China's long-running campaign to acquire American intellectual property, technology, and strategic advantage, often without a single shot being fired. Today, we'll talk about how modern espionage really works, what most people misunderstand about cyber and economic warfare, and what the US and its allies must do if they want to protect innovation, truth, and national security in the years ahead. David Shedd, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gary. It's a pleasure to be with you and to talk about this very important topic of China and its great heist of America's secrets.
Indeed. So we'll start diving into that by, I'd like to know, whatever you can disclose, specific methods has the Chinese, Communist Party, CCP, used to conduct its state orchestrated espionage campaigns against the US and our allies?
Gary, I think it's important for you and your audience to have a little bit of the context before I get to the heart of your question, which is profound and complex in terms of where we are today with the grand larceny of our trade secrets by the Chinese Communist Party. That background goes back to the spring of 1984 when Deng Xiaoping, coming out of the Cultural Revolution in China under Mao, really set a course that Xi Jinping today, as China's leader, is really pursuing. And in that speech to a Japanese audience, Deng Xiaoping laid out that China was going to pursue a single party state. Of course, he called it socialism. We would call it Marxism, communism, as a single party, and that would be the Chinese Communist Party, i.e., no democracy. I mean, this would be a party that today numbers somewhere between 80 to 100 million out of 1.4 billion people. It's tiny relative to the size of the entire population. But then he said something else very importantly. In that speech to this Japanese audience, he said, and China will simultaneously coexist with managed capitalism. Now, for those who may have Mandarin, it's a very flowery language. It's very difficult to interpret, but the interpretation by those who, and I'm not a fluent Mandarin speaker or user of the language, but I will say that those who are can go back to that speech and really describe it as seminal in setting the course on which then China went on to be where it is today. So that's in 1984. That's 5 years before Tiananmen Square in June of 1989 and the massacres there, the pro-democracy uprisings. The United States, along with the West more generally, kind of overlooked all of that because the idea was to integrate China into the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, what went on to be the World Trade Organization, the WTO. In December of 2001, China joins. It is bipartisan in its support. So it was really masterminded in terms of that journey of China joining the WTO by the Clinton administration and then endorsed by the George W. Bush administration by December of 2001, three months after 9/11 had taken place. Two faulty assumptions were made now about the WTO. and having China in it. One, that it would abide by the rules of trade and international finance, because now it would have been brought into the international order. We like all those lofty terms in terms of the post-World War Bretton Woods and IMF and all of that. And now it would play by those rules while gaining market access into the United States and elsewhere through most favored nation status, and all the restrictions on their trade were lifted. The second one, and nothing to do then with holding them back from what had occurred at Tiananmen about 11 years earlier. Subsequently, there was also this expectation that China would over time democratize. Maybe not in our form, but in some form that somehow the CCP, this Chinese Communist Party, would fray at the edges, and over time, while people had economic choice with this managed capitalism, they would then call out for a voice in the public square that we would call democracy in terms of choosing their leaders. Nothing could be further from the truth. So in 2001, just to give everyone sort of a level set, China was a $1.3 trillion GDP market in terms of its economy. In those same yuans or dollars amount, today it's nearly 20 trillion dollars. So it's meteoric in its rise in doing this. Now comes in the intelligence espionage aspect. Now I'm getting to the core of your question. It was important to understand that backdrop because we maintain, with my co-author and I maintain, in terms of the Great Heist and China's epic campaign to steal America's secrets, that great modern day leap forward by China could not be accomplished and continues to not be something that China can accomplish toward 2035 when it wishes to double, according to Xi Jinping in 2020, its economy without stealing our intellectual property, our know-how, and our technology and innovation. So what former director of FBI, Chris Wray, put it, he says upwards of 600 billion per year is stolen in our intellectual property
Wow.
along every economic sector that you can think of, ranging from green energy all the way to stealth aircraft to now most recently all the talk about artificial intelligence and large language models, microchips, whatever they can get their hands on it. As one pundit told me one time, they'll steal the buttons off your shirt if they need them and literally will take it. What's this mean for them? And then we can get into how are they doing this. What it means for them is that they pay no research and development costs. That's the first thing. So think about the pharmaceutical area. Billions of dollars spent in research and development in terms of biotech and the world of pharma. They steal that aspect, leapfrog into production, or they leapfrog into the production of electric vehicles, of which BYD is by far now the number one EV seller in the world, well ahead of Tesla, which was, of course, the objective of Elon Musk in terms of being the sector leader in EVs. That's long now passed, in part because autopilot was stolen from Tesla by BYD and X, another company, and they've used it there. So it goes on in terms of this great leap forward across every single sector, including agriculture and modified seeds and all of that. It's all captured in the book. And what
Yeah,
the
they were
book is,
digging up Monsanto seeds.
they're out in the Iowa farmland. They're out there digging them up and taking them home. What's that all about? That's to avoid a great famine again in China, like occurred under the Cultural Revolution of Mao Zedong. I say all that, Gary, just to give you a sense of the scope, the scale, the depth and breadth of this grand larceny of our knowledge. The worst part is we've enabled it. We've enabled it with going and investing in China, thinking that by exception they won't take my intellectual property once I'm there. We've enabled it by financing companies inside China that are front companies for the People's Liberation Army and their modernization. And then inside the United States, we have allowed them entry into our most advanced research at our universities and national laboratories. You and I were having a discussion before about Sandia Laboratory. They've done it at Los Alamos. The book captures that in terms of the wind tunneling expertise that they now have in hypersonics. And so it goes on and on and on. And then they have the modalities of how they do this, everything ranging from cyber capabilities of extracting the data all the way to human penetrations, recruitments that they make, insider threats, and all of that that corporate America needs to be aware of. So, long introduction to your original question, but I think level setting that was an important thing for your audience.
No doubt about that. And so, how do you define in the book, the great heist? Is it primary? I know it's all three, but is it primarily economic or technological, strategic, or all of the above?
It really is all the above, and but it's guided by what in our intelligence community in the United States we would call the sort of requirements process established by our policymakers. In other words, the intelligence community, the CIA, NSA, and other organizations don't just willy-nilly, that's a very technical term, go out and just collect anything they want. They say, the policymaker has made this issue or this topic, this country, this region priority one, two, three, four, or five, and you pursue that. China's done something quite similar in that Xi Jinping, who came to power, consolidated power in 2013 as the chairman of the CCP and many other titles that he holds, is that he kicked off, and the CCP kicked off Made in China 2025 in 2015, a 10-year strategic plan with 10 objectives in terms of technologies and capabilities that they wanted to advance on in their great modern day leap forward. They have accomplished the vast majority of those, some of them even before 2025 last year. For example, in the EV market, they had more than accomplished their goal of matching Tesla and overcame Tesla in 2024.
Well,
Uh,
and Carney was just
the Prime Minister of Canada was there
yeah.
just inking another deal. But now Xi Jinping has extended that plan to 2030. So we know that the ongoing efforts to acquire our technology, our innovation, invest in critical infrastructure inside the United States, the tools in what they use is cyber, as I've already mentioned, but also a very effective and efficient capability known as under the Ministry of State Security and known as Bureau 18 inside that ministry. And the book sort of really unpacks what this Ministry of State Security does by way of its directed operations against the United States to acquire this know-how.
One of the things that it's always been sort of vexing about to me personally or professionally, about this discussion is just, like kind of to what extent of Western inaction or complacency, enabled China's ability to do all this, to acquire our IP and technology. Is it because that we thought if we're, sort of good guys about all this, that China will, sort of move into the like WTO like context that you described?
Well, it's a mix. I've sort of narrowed it down to three types of people in terms of answering your question. The first one is, and I'll just use the word bluntly, it's hubris. It goes something like this: I will always stay ahead of them. I'm smarter than they are. My innovative capabilities, and you might think of Elon Musk in that category that would think that when it came to Tesla and breaking ground in its gigafactory in Shanghai in 2019. All the while, through the back door, Mr. Cao was stealing the and uploading the source code for the pilotless autopilot
Wow.
version in the car, worth by Tesla's own admission about $1 billion in losses.
Wow.
So this is not insignificant. So that's one category. I'll just stay ahead of them, or I'm different. I'm better than they are, and so what am I to worry about? That I call hubris. That's simply a faulty way of thinking about the capabilities of the Chinese to advance their own agenda with stolen property that they take. The second kind is it won't happen on my watch category. Look, it's such a lucrative market to go into China, try and sell to 1.4 billion people, fastest growing by all measures of a middle class. What's not to like? But it won't happen on my watch. I know they do these bad things, but that's sort of the cost of doing business. I may not stay ahead of them, but I've got market access, and my quarter-on-quarter earnings will reflect that, and I'll get by with it without it collapsing while I'm doing it, and they steal my secrets to the point that they replicate it, and I'm out of business, but not on my watch. The third one. I think this is the a targeted audience for the book as well. And this audience is one that um, they see headlines about this, but they don't really understand it. They go, "What's this about Mr. Ding and Google being prosecuted, and he stole some source code for applications with graphic processing units. I don't understand it." And they see what China is doing is kind of one-off while they're at Walmart buying apparel made in China. And it doesn't resonate. They're not in love with the fact that China does this. They think they do some bad things, but they have no idea of the enormity of this of the heist that we're talking about, which this book then really presents as an arc over time. That third category is what I call the naivete one. It's the one who just isn't well enough informed. And if they read the book, they go, and I've had these kind of reactions, they say, I had no idea that it was like this. They don't have hubris, they don't, not on my watch, but it's that third category. So those are kind of how I see the general reaction to this story.
And, of course, one of the primary sectors that they're interested in is the defense industrial base, tech firms, or, our telecom, infrastructure and stuff like that. How do you assess the state of the defense industrial base?
Well, the cover of this book right there has for those
Can
who
can you hold it up some more?
sure.
I'm gonna, yeah, yeah.
So
It's a
right
very
so right here you have the F-35. Right here you have the FC-31, a digital twin of the F-35. That cost Northrop Grumman somewhere a major defense contractor for those who have not heard of Northrop Grumman. It cost them well over $100 million to remodify the stealth software associated with the F-35 once they knew that the Chinese had captured. That's not just the design piece, it's all the inner workings of this advanced stealth aircraft known as the F-35. That's just one example. Then I view the U.S. military slash defense industrial base as one that has had a process of awakening of what the Chinese can do. And I want your audience to really hone in on two particularly nefarious cyber campaigns that I'm sure you know all about, Gary. The first is these are Microsoft terms to it when they say typhoon. It's the Salt Typhoon and the Volt Typhoon, and they're quite different, although there's overlap. The Salt Typhoon is a campaign launched about 3 years ago by the Chinese by the Ministry of State Security, their intelligence apparatus, aimed at penetrating the entirety of our telecommunications networks. And it is the metadata piece of it. It is the uh, organizational piece around the fiber optics and having embedded capabilities there,
I
not
don't know if you
just
can
in the
hear that.
United States, but 80 countries.
Forgive
80
the
countries.
interruption. Wait 1 second.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that sound, David, but that was my head exploding.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, and then it's in 80 countries. So this is not just the United
Wow, I
States.
didn't know that.
So then Volt Typhoon is quite different. Volt Typhoon, think of it as having cyber kill switches. Volt Typhoon will sit there, and when they want to disrupt our infrastructure, think of our water supplies, think of our electric grids, think of infrastructure, they're able then to attack it. How you'd have to get into the classified world, which I obviously cannot do. I don't know like what would trigger it. I don't know what our defenses have been put in place now to counter Volt Typhoon. But these two are one of the most insidious campaigns launched by the Chinese into both versions are infrastructure because telecommunications obvious, but it's directed at the telecommunications in when you hear salt typhoon. That's the best description. Now, my subject matter experts in cybersecurity, and you're one of them, may know that there are 7 other campaigns in the works by the Chinese. It doesn't end with just those two. And so I really want to highlight those as really being absolutely critical in terms of what the Chinese are doing in this great heist as well.
No doubt. That's such important and useful context. What about human intelligence, regarding China and us, and how would you assess, to whatever you can
Sure.
disclose?
No, I'm happy to talk about that because what we have seen under Xi Jinping is a Ministry of State Security that has more than doubled in size. It is now 300,000 strong,
Wow.
as opposed to 150,000 and when he came to power in 2013, as I said, and assumed the leadership of the CCP and the Chinese military and all the rest. So their capabilities have improved significantly over time in terms of doing that. On the human intelligence side, in 2017, so 9 years ago, the Chinese Communist Party passed a law. Don't think of our legislature as dysfunctional as it may be at times, not passing a law in that way. They issued an edict they call passing a law in China, which is known as the National Intelligence Law. In
Mhm.
that National Intelligence Law, Article 7 is absolutely critical. That law requires, and in that article, requires that every Chinese citizen at home and abroad, and every Chinese entity, think of every business that has a Chinese moniker to them in ownership, is required to support the CCP when called upon. Think about the largesse of that in terms of the enormity. It's not can, should, would be nice. Please assist is will. It's declarative and it leaves no leeway to say no. And of course, as we know, as the old adage goes, they have their ways of enforcing that. Um, family back there, if it's a Chinese student in the United States. But let me be very clear, Gary. I'm not saying every Chinese student in the United States is a spy, but I will say everyone can be called upon by the CCP and by law, their law, they must cooperate
Wow.
unless they choose not to and suffer the consequences. Obviously, that's the other option. But obviously, the duress on any Chinese citizen at home and abroad in every, so when you think of TikTok and even a 20% ownership by ByteDance, the parent of TikTok, their ability to control not only the algorithms on the data of a still partially owned Chinese company, is that ByteDance has no option but to cooperate with the Chinese government slash Chinese Communist Party, which is the government. Remember, it's the single state that Deng Xiaoping talked about. So there is no leeway to say no.
Well,
That's why
how
I
did
don't
they,
like the
how
deal
did,
on TikTok.
yeah, I mean, so let's just stay on that for a second. How do we get the deal done with Oracle and all that? I mean, with this knowledge, I mean, like, how could they have done that?
Well, to me, it's this whether again hubris, naivete, or some combination thereof.
Or not
That
on my
you
watch, like you were
or
saying
not on my
earlier.
watch
Yeah.
is we have a TikTok that will continue to still generate the algorithms. And as Ronald Reagan famously said, trust but verify. I have no way to verify that they are not extracting the data of 170 million users of TikTok in the United States and 1.6 to 1.7 billion worldwide
Wow.
in terms of the data, and then manipulating it so the clicks are favorable to the agenda of the CCP on topics like putting Hamas above Israel when it comes to the clicks and all of that. What is that all about? That's shaping hearts and minds over time. It's not a single event. Let's be clear. It's not one time TikTok does it and all of a sudden little gnomes walk out and do
Right. Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
says to do. But over time, it shapes the view toward what the Chinese Communist Party wants you to think and have as an outcome versus us.
Well, that really ties, as we're kind of wrapping up here. I know we have just a few minutes. By the way, thank you again for doing this.
Delighted to do this. This message
Um,
has to get out, Gary.
it's important. So how we met was you were on a panel at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And I viewed it with great interest and reached out to you. We have some colleagues in common at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and one of the things that one of them did was an empirical analysis to support or refute exactly your premise, which is the amount of posts that are positive, let's just say for Israel, since that's the last thing you said, versus negative, and it was some order of magnitude of 10 to 1
Right.
against Israel compared to other social media platforms. And so you know about that, obviously.
Exactly.
What can you say?
Well, no, that's all part of let's be very clear. China has every interest in promoting conflict inside the United States, social conflict, whether it's over sexual preferences, whether it's over racial issues, whether it's over law enforcement, as we see in Minneapolis, and the immigration issue. They'll take the issue, which has its generic roots as a real issue, but then what it does, it accentuates and it shines a bright light on outcomes that they wish to see. And at a minimum, they want conflict. If the United States is fighting itself inside and tearing itself up and tearing each other up, that's to their benefit. To be very
And
clear.
I mean, didn't Lincoln, I think, we can have a democracy if we can keep it. I'm not sure if that was Lincoln, but a famous
Yes,
president.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And we have to fight to save that democracy.
that's
But as
right.
Reagan
Yeah.
said, it's always just one generation away from losing it.
Wow.
And that's the sort of thing that concerns me deeply, because these capabilities, I might add, we would have never allowed the Soviet Union this kind of access in the United States. But because, as I said on that FDD panel, that the and FDD itself was saying in the questioning, we're so intertwined that it's very difficult to unwrap us in the sense of our codependencies. However, what we can do, and let's end with a really positive note, we can identify those proprietary commercial secrets that we want to protect at all costs, which really mirror the collection efforts that they have against us in AI, quantum, biotech, and you could go on and on. And what is that intellectual property that you will ring fence around which you will put, artillery around it to protect it, whether it's in the cyber domain and all the rest in terms of protecting that. Then, what is our whole of society response to this economic warfare that China has long ago launched against us? And no end in sight, by the way. This isn't that
Yeah.
somehow we're now at a truce. And when President Trump goes to Beijing, if that trip materializes in April or thereabouts, there is no certainty in my mind that anything that the Chinese commit to do, they will actually follow through by way of positive action. We already have them, Xi telling President Obama they would stop their cyber attacks. They accelerated after the Rose Garden event.
Yeah, I remember.
So it's a naive thing, and again, I go back to trust but verify, because we are already at economic war by one party toward us.
No doubt. Wow. Well, I could listen and learn from you all day, David. Thank you so much for who you are and for what you do, and most importantly, why you do it and have done it for our country. And one of my missions always has been to shine the light on the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe. At work, at home, or at school, and you're certainly at the top of the list. How does our audience get a copy of your book?
So it's on Amazon. It's at HarperCollins, the publisher, and it's at your local bookstores as well. I've seen them in multiple Barnes and Nobles and that,
Great.
but Amazon's probably the easiest one. And I would hope that your audience doesn't receive a blank copy, because the Chinese have actually gotten into the supply chain and sent out literally blank pages to the book.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and
Wait. I want to get a screenshot of that if you don't mind, because I'm going to use that for the cover of the show. So yeah, just hold it up. No, I want to see your face also if you don't mind. There you go. Got it. Oh my God, they sent out blank
blank
copies of the
blank
book
copy.
on the
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah, and if you go to Amazon and see the reviews, there's a couple of complaints, whether bot created, I don't know, about how they were heisted into getting a blank copy. Obviously, anybody that got one that wanted the words version could get it replaced. That was yeah, they got it fixed. These were
Listen, man,
friends of mine that got them.
David, I've done over, I don't know, 300 interviews with some of the smartest people in the world about everything from, basic cyber hygiene to post-quantum cryptography or whatever. This is the most unusual thing I think I've ever heard.
Yep. Yeah.
And wow, well, I'm sorry that happened. The flip side to that is at least I think your voice matters.
Exactly, because as the subheading says here, the story the CCP does not want revealed, doesn't want you to know, is in this
Wow.
book. And
Wow.
so I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon and elsewhere, wherever books
Yeah,
are sold.
for sure. And do you want people to contact you?
Certainly on LinkedIn they can. And when you post this or whatever you
Okay.
do
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well,
for
by all
sure.
means.
So it's David Shedd, Shedd,
Correct.
just so everybody knows. Well, I'm going to say it again because it's really true. On behalf of a grateful digital universe, really, David, thanks for who you are and for what you do and why you do it. And I'm really lucky to have met you.
Likewise. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank
All
you
right.
again for inviting me.
Have a great day.
Take care. Bye bye.